In this EcoWest presentation, we share findings from a report which estimates the economic contributions of conservation spending in the United States. The federal government is the leading funder for conservation investments. In 2011, it provided over $23 billion in direct investment and accounted for 60% of spending across all sources. Economic contributions of conservation spending are highest in California, Florida, Texas, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. State-level investments range from $4.3 billion in California to $108 million in Rhode Island. On an aggregate basis, California, Oregon, and Washington State have the highest economic contributions for conservation spending within the West. On the upper end, these investments support nearly 29,000 jobs and contribute $3 billion to the state GDP in California, as compared to only 3,200 jobs and $300 million for the state GDP in Nevada. While California leads the pack in conservation spending in absolute terms, it is also important to examine state-by-state differences using per capita spending levels. Through this lens, California, with its population of 38 million people, actually drops to the lowest level with 113 in per capita spending. In contrast, Wyoming has the highest amount, with $1,306 in per capita spending for its population of 576,000 people. The federal government contributes an average of 63% of conservation spending by state within the West, slightly higher than the national average of 60%. Federal government contributions for conservation investments are as high as 72% in New Mexico and as low as 48% in Wyoming. Nationwide, the $38.8 billion in conservation spending leads to $93.2 billion in total economic output. Comparing direct expenditures on conservation to the total economic output of this spending shows that the return on investment is greatest in California and Illinois. Direct conservation spending results in economic returns which are higher than the original investment in all but 3 states: Texas, Wyoming, and South Dakota. In California, direct conservation spending of $4.3 billion generated $8.2 billion in total economic output, yielding a return on investment of 91%. Wyoming is the only of 3 states with a negative ROI. Its original investment of $753 million produced an economic output of only $738 million. At the national level, $38.8 billion of conservation spending led to $93.2 billion of economic output in 2011, a ratio of 42%. Within the West, $13.7 billion in direct conservation investments generated $20.9 billion in total economic activity in 2011, a ratio of 66%. Direct conservation spending impacts nearly every sector of the economy, with the greatest impacts observed in the government sector. Roughly 41.6 million of income and 138,000 jobs in the public sector are supported by conservation expenditures. The upper chart in this slide shows how economic contributions of conservation spending reach across various economic sectors. The total economic contribution of conservation spending is $18.7 million for the government sector and $12.6 million for the manufacturing sector. The lower chart demonstrates that conservation spending supports 138,000 jobs in the public sector and 68,000 jobs in retail trade. Other sectors that experience high employment impacts include accommodations and food services, health and social services, and scientific and technical professional services. Download more slides and other resources at ecowest.org.